on the rocks.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah, there you go. You've been to Japan before?
I have twice, yeah.
Oh, really? When was the last time?
Probably about 15 years ago now.
Oh, that's a long time ago.
Been a long time. Did Tokyo, Kyoto was my favorite actually. I know
15 years ago?
Yeah,
Oh.
I know my pronunciation is.
No, the
is
Kyoto's
horrible.
nice.
Yeah, and then
Right.
we went skiing in Niseko.
Niseko?
Yeah,
that's
which was
great.
great, beautiful. There's a lot of Aussies
There's a
over
lot
there.
of,
but it was-
exactly, that's what I was going to say.
It was when it was coming up. Like it wasn't always this well-known ski town around the world.
Well, 15 years ago, 2010.
Maybe even 20 years ago. Like
Yeah,
there
maybe 20 years ago.
There was
it
limited
like,
development, very
Exactly.
traditional restaurants, and
now there's
I
like
loved
so
it.
many, 5-star hotels, 3-star restaurants, and all that stuff,
The Japanese
So
are very
many
respectful
foreigners.
too. I love the Japanese culture, very respectful. Whereas the Australians, when we go over there, a lot more aggressive on the ski slopes, even places skiing like in Europe as well. They're very aggressive on the the slopes. So I love it in Japan. It's that if people are very nice and respectful, you know that they're Japanese.
Well, well, first of all, thanks for coming, on the show, James. And for the people who are not familiar with you, especially in like an Asian market or Japanese market, since we've been talking about Japan, you are the executive coach, author, speaker, all these titles that you have, But I would like to find out more before we get into that.
Yeah.
I would like to know who you are. I know you have your podcast, Win Today, but most of the podcast is about somebody else. And I would like to hear more about you. And I know in your bio, I saw you're from Australia, right? And you came out here when was that?
2012, I moved to Boston.
Why Boston?
I was doing an MBA at an international business school that was 9 months in Boston and 3 months in Shanghai, China.
Oh, cool.
Very different. Where
You did go to Shanghai then?
I did, yeah. My Mandarin is worse than my Japanese. So you've got you're holding up the sign with the Mandarin characters, and to show a taxi driver by yourself at 2 a.m. to go wherever you want to go, and that was it. I checked into the hotel where I was going to live for 3 months, and I love China. I love traveling. It makes you realize there's a whole big world out there, and it suddenly makes your own problems far less significant when you realize there's a whole big world out there. So many endless opportunities to explore.
But you're going back to Australia. You grew up in Brisbane, right?
Yeah.
I've been to Brisbane.
Oh,
I actually went
nice.
to Gold Coast.
Yeah,
right?
beautiful part of the world.
Yeah, a lot of Japanese there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they go
Great
surfing,
Japanese food as well. Yeah, love surfing. And Brisbane is also hosting the 2032 Olympic Games.
Okay.
Which is crazy. After it's
like 7 years from now? Okay.
Yeah, it goes like Paris, London, Paris, LA in 2028, and then Brisbane 2032, which I find is
Not
fascinating.
Sydney?
Sydney was 2000, so that was a very iconic Olympic Games as well, the turn of the millennium, but Brisbane will put on a good show. So Brisbane has had a really big property boom in the last couple of years. The prices have gone absolutely crazy there. But Brisbane's a beautiful, all my family is there. So many friends are there. I go back every chance I get. We go back every Christmas.
Well, it's so funny because when I am in acting. However, I was also, before I was an investment banker, and then when I turned into acting, I started doing real estate. And I represented Sotheby's and Christie's. And I was head of Christie's in Japan for a while, from 2018 until COVID, I think, 2017 till COVID. And there's a great guy named Ken Jacobs in Australia, I think in Sydney and all over the place. He's like the biggest Christie's and biggest luxury real estate guy in Australia. So I know the market. It's huge. A lot of investment from China.
Huge.
Even Japan.
Yeah.
So it's a booming market to the States, isn't it?
There is. And there's a lot of conversations, as there is in many countries, about how much foreign investment do you allow of these different things. I don't even know if I necessarily have an opinion on that, but certainly it's an interesting thing to consider if you feel like everyday people, it's harder for them. It's the same with the investment banks, right? Like buying up, these companies that are multi-billion-dollar companies that are coming and buying up all these residential houses.
I remember Alan Bond.
Yeah, Alan Bond.
Right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
from Australia.
America's Cup. Yeah.
And he was actually investor in Hong Kong, a lot of buildings, bond buildings over there.
Yeah.
Even the News Corp.
Yeah.
Right?
Rupert Murdoch.
The Australian, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of Australians like who came out to the international market because, well, you can tell me why, but the Australia, the biggest continent, I guess, right?
Yeah.
And it's not really a part of Asia, but it's in that area, right?
Yeah.
So it's very, very unique. And how was that growing up in Australia?
It was great. And we have the resources, like the literal, like mining is such a big business for countries like China and everywhere else. So resources, mining is what underpins the Australian economy. We have a lot of other things like financial services sectors. We've got some strong banks, but mining is really what underpins the Australian economy. Growing up in Australia was amazing for me. It was outdoors. It was a very active outdoor lifestyle, playing whatever sport that you can. Backyard cricket, rugby,
rugby.
all that stuff. I loved doing that. Tennis, surfing.
See, it's so funny because I grew up in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
So I did play rugby. I didn't play cricket, but I know there's a thing called Aussie League.
Yeah.
Right, which is crazy rugby.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like.
Are you doing there's the AFL, Australian football?
Yeah.
So it's
Aussie League. It's called, right?
It's much more of a cardio burn. So I actually never played that really growing up. Okay. That's very popular in Victoria. It's a religion in Victoria where Melbourne is the capital city of Victoria.
Yeah.
But it was great, and I just So
did you play rugby then? Yeah.
So I did, not very well. Like I didn't particularly excel in any of these things. But what's funny is that I became a skilled generalist. It means that if I'm going to play any new sport today, I can pick it up pretty easily because I have been a generalist. Right. And it's an interesting concept that I took into my career as well. I was always envious of people that had a very clear concentration in a field. Like I want to be a lawyer. I'm going to do a law degree. I've got my whole life mapped out for me. Or I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to have a medical degree and I've got my entire life mapped out as a doctor. Mine was chopping and changing, doing all of these different things, but I always stayed in momentum. And it meant that I could take those skills that I learned in these different industries.
But isn't it true that, like, depending on the decade, I guess, people are looking for generalists who can actually do wide things but shallow? And then it turns to like specialists who can do one particular thing, expert, right? And then it just keeps going back and forth, isn't it?
It does.
In the business industry. Right?
Yeah, we can see it now with AI is a perfect example. They want the people that can program these LLMs and do all of that stuff. But it took me a long time to appreciate the value of being a generalist. But even then, as a generalist, I spent more than 10 years in the world of financial planning. So I knew that world inside out. I was there when the subprime mortgage crisis hit. Right. I had a background in writing as well. Wait,
before you go into that.
Yeah.
So you were born in Brisbane.
Yep.
You stayed in Brisbane.
Yep.
And you went to financial. But what did your parents do?
My father was, he was a successful financial planner.
Okay.
He was actually he was someone who had chopped and changed a lot as well. So he was a generalist. Okay. He was the son of his father worked and lived as a manager on a pig farm. So they were certainly not affluent at all growing up. So my father was raised with the belief that you should never expect too much of your life because you're ultimately going to end up disappointed. I mean, my father was born in 1940. So that was on the tail end of the Great Depression. That was still a very vivid memory for many families. It was around, the start of World War II. There was a lot of hardship.
So the Australians were in the Allies.
Yes.
During the World War II?
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
And then were they fighting against Japan as well? Even though it was like right next to you.
Definitely. Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's right.
Wow.
And I think there's even some crazy stories about when the world had ended, but there were areas where word didn't get to them that the war had ended. So they're still fighting, which is pretty crazy. Right. And he had a bit of an interesting thing where he ended up, he was able to have a moderately successful career in property development, but it was around the time when interest rates were extremely high. So it was about 18% interest rates, which is crazy. And he took on this property development, which was just a complete fail in every sense of the word, and almost lost everything. And he had a conversation with my mum, and her advice to him was that we can lose the house, we can lose everything, but don't lose your good name.
Wow.
So integrity was really that attribute that underpinned, and he was, I was around then, I was very young. I have an older brother, he was born, and my mum was pregnant with my younger sister. We've got three three kids in our
Siblings,
family. Yeah, exactly. And he was so on the verge of filing for bankruptcy, ended up able to rebuild. And he wrote a manuscript about his experience where he tied in things like personal finance principles with the book that transformed his life, which was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
Wow, really?
So yeah, he wrote this manuscript to help people.
Circles back, right?
Exactly.
Wow.
And then no one wanted the manuscript. None of the publishers cared. So what he did was he eventually found someone who said, "We will print this book for you if you bear all of the risk and thus all of the reward." So that's what he did. He put everything on the line again, and that book became incredibly successful. 1 in 6 Australian households had it, and it sold more than 2 million copies to date. So that was the sort of family environment that I grew up in, was this weird sort of turmoil about what's going on, and then having someone as I entered high school who ended up becoming quite well known, but to me he was just my father. You don't know anything else.
I'm sorry, I keep asking all these different questions.
Yeah, go for it.
It might be my OCD and ADHD.
Maybe it's the whiskey.
Or whiskey. Good point. No, so like when you mentioned about like, don't dirty our family name, what have you, right? What kind of a cultural background does the Australian have? For example, in Japanese, we have this like, samurai era, the Bushido, and, all these things, and very disciplined, very conservative, very honorable thing. I know the history, I think, to my knowledge, as far as I know, Australia's been there for almost 250 years, maybe, a little bit after US, right? And initially it was a people from England, the outcast that went over to Australia. And where did that honorable cultural thing that come from, in Australia, the people over there? Do you know?
Yeah, I might receive some heat for this.
Okay, great.
I don't think we have I'll be cancelled as a result of this. Maybe it's a whiskey for me. No. We're opening up now, Sonny.
No.
I don't think we have anywhere near the level of duty and honor that the Japanese culture has. Now, I'm sure there are elements of the Japanese culture where perhaps that's taken a little bit too far, as I've seen in other Asian countries and other parts around the world where you feel like you're living someone else's life rather than your own. Whereas in Australia, it's different. If you're raised on good family values where your parents, I feel like you need to have kids for yourself to realize all the sacrifices that your parents have made.
Yeah.
But if you've been instilled with those strong values and you want to give back, and the best way to give back is to become the best you that you can be. And that's what I've been interested in doing. It's just took me a long time to get to that point. It was really at the age of about 23 where I realized, look, I need to look at myself in the mirror and make some big changes here, because I'm not going down the trajectory that is reflective of the focus and effort that my parents instilled in me and the values that they instilled in me.
It's just the honorable thing. You don't want to, lose face, if you will, or the dirtier family name, right?
Yeah.
Where does that? It's very, very. I don't know if it's in U.S. We really have that here that much. That because you always think about just yourself. You're number one. Right?
Yeah.
And where does that come in the culture of Australia? Because I don't know much about cultural thing in Australia, where in Japan we have things like tea ceremony, the flower arrangement, all these like inner Zen type of thing. Is there such? What is it? Is Christianity, the religion, very popular or very prominent in Australia?
We didn't really have many rituals and things like that. Like I went to a Catholic high school, was raised as a Catholic upbringing, but it's not like, we weren't at church every single week or anything like that. Right. For me, so when it comes to wealth and generational wealth, the further the generations get from being connected to the story and the values that built the wealth in the first place, the more likely they are to erode that wealth. So on the condition that you're very, very clear on the story and the values that built the wealth to begin with, then you can theoretically have generational wealth as each generation understands the lessons and can build on it in their own unique way. I am intimately aware of the stories that built my father's success. So for me, it's such a big focus of carrying that message on. I know the stories of him with his family where they went to a local restaurant and had to leave that restaurant because they saw the prices on the menu and couldn't do that. I've mentored high school kids now where we've gone out to dinner for the first time and he's quietly held a menu and then sort of dropped it. And I said, "Is everything okay?" And he said, "It's the first time I've held a menu in my hands."
Wow.
That had never even occurred to me. But it was almost like I had one foot in the camp of what it's like to be successful through an unbelievable amount of effort and self-belief and integrity. And then on the other side, watching people who have done the best they can do with the limited circumstances that they had, which I find incredibly inspiring. I've always sort of had a foot in those two camps, and it's what drives me today.
It's so funny because in Japan, when I was in investment banking or private equity, and I was advising a lot of Japanese major corporations, as well as still private, but they have made billions of dollars as a family. And it's well known in Japanese society that second generation tend to destroy the business. So, and then the third generation actually picks it up and makes it better. And it seems like, from my experience, not as when you're close to it, you really don't know how your father made it. Because when you realize that you're old enough to realize what your father did, he's successful already. So they don't see what they had to go through.
Yeah.
But the third generation see the downfall and the mistakes that your father made, the second generation, so that you pick it up and you go, okay, I have to be more disciplined. I got to do this. I can't make this mistake. It's a little different, and I think because you saw your father go down and come back up again, like my father did as well, that gave me more ambition, more discipline, and I guess I was scared to be like my father when he was down.
Yeah.
That motivated me.
Absolutely.
Is that something that you went through as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a Harvard study where they talk about shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. Like, it's in Western culture, the third generation destroys it because they're the ones who are most disconnected. So again, I feel like that goes back to the lack of honor and sense of duty that is in the Japanese culture, which is so strong. But I'll tell you some of the things in my family. I have 0 memories of ever having a family dinner in front of the television. We never did that. We never we never had cable TV ever. My parents, when we grew up, they had a key with a little red tag on it, and the moment that they were done, where it was time for us to do our homework or go to bed, or the 20 minutes was up, they would turn that key and power to the entire room would disappear. That was the TV, that was the computer, that was it. So all of my friends had, they had cable television. They had the occasional meal in front of the TV. I never had that, and it drove me absolutely crazy.
Wow.
But now looking back on it, what an incredible gift like that. To help instill those family values. It takes so long for the student to absorb the lessons of the master. And that doesn't mean necessarily, there's a Leonardo da Vinci quote that says, "How sad to see the student or the pupil that does not surpass the master." And I think that's really, really interesting. But if you're
Are you sure that's Da Vinci and not like a Shaolin monk?
Yeah, possibly.
Same thing, right?
Possibly, yes, exactly. But if your mentor or your teacher is Leonardo da Vinci, how do you possibly follow that? And all that happens, as we then talk about the quote, like, comparison is the thief of joy. If you're trying to surpass someone who is a true enigma, like imagine being one of Elon Musk's kids, trying to surpass that or reach that would be impossible for like 8 billion people on the planet, let alone his, although he has many, many children. So maybe one of them can figure it out. So you shouldn't try and surpass that person. You should live by the values that made the wealth and made the integrity and made the friendships and the resilience, but you should be the best you that you can be.
Right. So when you're thinking about the future as a kid in Brisbane, and then you go into, is there such thing as certified financial planner? CFP?
There is, absolutely. Yep, the gold standard of what it means to be a financial planner in Australia. Yep.
So you do that, I guess, right? Or
I
no?
have
No.
the advanced diploma of financial services, which was fine at the time. Then they had since brought in after the subprime mortgage crisis. And I was never actually a financial advisor myself.
Right.
I was overseeing a team of financial advisors.
Okay.
Yeah.
So after that, because of the mortgage blow up, and I think you were 23 or something at the time? Or?
It was about, when was it? So it was 28 when I made the decision to move away. And
Is that right?
and
but on your bio, it said something happened when you were 23.
So when I was,
what happened?
Yeah. So good question. So when I was in high school, due to a number of factors, one of them being that I had a successful father who at that point his career had really taken off, and I had my older brother who's 2 years older than me who performed very well academically, which is all you've got to go on when you're in high school. And I wasn't successful. Obviously, I didn't have a career. I'm 14, 15 years old, and I wasn't performing anywhere near as well as my brother in schoolwork. He was killing it. He was doing so great. And as a bunch of poor decisions, smoking cigarettes and drinking too much alcohol.
We all went through that. Yeah.
Exactly. All of those things that you go through, not prioritizing health, fitness, mindset, breathing, not sleep, not prioritizing any of that stuff. I was just in a horrible place mentally, physically, in every possible way. And as a result of all of those things, you're in high school. They tell you that this exam you're about to take is going to determine the rest of your life.
Right,
it's a massive amount of pressure.
Yeah.
Exactly. For a 16, 17-year-old. I almost feel bad asking kids these days, like, what do you want to be when you're older? I think it's just such a bad question to ask a 16 or a 17-year-old. And as a result of that pressure, I just had this debilitating anxiety disorder. But I had no idea what it was. I didn't understand it. Why am I randomly fainting? Why am I randomly throwing up in these different situations? Yeah. Why am I halfway through an exam putting up my hand to say that all of a sudden I'm deathly ill? What is going on? And they tell me to go and see the school nurse. And 15 minutes later, I'm totally fine. And all I have to show for it is this botched exam. Like, what the hell is going on with me? And eventually I reached a point at the age of 23 where, I was really just crawling through, like, the total sum of desires in my life at that time was just to make it through the day. That was it. I wasn't trying to succeed. I wasn't trying to be the best I could be. I was just trying to survive. And that is such a horrible mentality to go through life. That was it. I just wanted to get through this classroom that I'm in. I just wanted to get through that. I just wanted to make it through the day so I can drink 12 beers or whatever it was. And it's a horrible way to live. And until one day I was working at a liquor store. It was the first time they'd rostered me on where I'd be by myself. And the times this
arrested you?
No. It was they rostered as in like I was allocated to work on that shift.
Oh, okay. I thought he was
by myself. Yeah. And it was the situation for this anxiety. It was really the perfect storm was when it was a situation that I couldn't escape from. So that being rostered on by myself, where there was no one else there, if something happened to me, anyone could walk in and steal tens of thousands of dollars worth of stuff from the store. That to me was the perfect storm. Like, what am I going to do if I'm on for 8 hours by myself? And that's exactly what happened. And I had that moment where I fainted and I threw up. This is 20 minutes into into like an 8-hour shift or whatever it was in Brisbane, Australia. And I had to call the manager on his day off. He was, with his kids, which is horrible. He had to come in and take it over. And he had no idea what was going on with me because I had no idea what was going on with me. And there was only one person that I trusted to share my feelings with, and that was my mum. And I said, I can't live like this anymore. What kind of life is this? And I am just devastated, absolutely the most heartbroken, just devastated point of my life. And she said, you have everything you need to succeed right here and right here. And she tapped my head and my heart. And that was the moment when everything changed for me. And that was when I really took on not only that sense of duty, but a commitment to say, you know what, I'm going to be the best I can be. There is not a single thing in this life that can knock me off course from here on out.
Wow. And
that was the moment everything changed.
And it's so amazing because when I'm sitting here listening to you speak, with such a confidence and prominency, I cannot imagine you being in that liquor store at 23 having that panic attack. And I'm sure from there you had a lot of training, a lot of overcoming of hurdles and challenges
So
to
many.
be where you are now. And that's very interesting to people who's listening to this.
Yeah. Let me give you an example. It's almost a bit of a metaphor of how I sort of approach this. A few years ago, I went and did a cold plunge for the first time. You sit in a cold plunge, the water's like 40 degrees. It's freezing. It's very, very, very cold. I went in the first time I'd ever done it, and I lasted 60 seconds. Wow. And that was it. My body was just screaming I had to get out of there. And I had a buddy of mine that I did it with, and he did 10 minutes. The same tub.
Wow.
I hopped in again. 60 seconds, I'm out of there. And this is after I've learned all of the mindset stuff. When the day was around, this is only like a few years ago. He did 10 minutes. I did another 60 seconds. He did another 10 minutes. And I realized we're both human. If he can do it, I can do it. What's the difference? And it's really just about mindset. And it was really about harnessing breathing. So now I have been able to apply those different tools. So I look at myself back then, I was a human who just didn't have the tools to be able to succeed.
Okay.
So for someone out there who is struggling, there is an incredible you lying inside you that all of us would love to meet. You would love to meet that person when you looked at them in the mirror. But if you don't have the tools at your disposal, that person cannot flourish. They can't come to life.
Right.
So find the tools.
Okay.
And for me, that was consuming everything that I could find. I read every book that I could possibly get my hands on. Mindset, peak performance, breathing, relationships, resilience. I wanted to learn everything. Nutrition, sleep. And that's a journey that I've been on now for almost 20 years.
So from 23
Yeah.
until you became a financial advisor after that, right?
I was in the financial advising world and I had the qualifications, but my job was, I've always had a weird thing about being put into a box. So it was
you and me both.
Exactly. Like a bit of it was weird. You know, they talk about like being like the black sheep or whatever it is. And for me, it was just a little bit, I don't know. I just felt uncomfortable with this idea of ever being put into a box where everything was mapped out, even though for so much of my life, it's exactly what I wanted. So I was a business development manager where I was in charge of things like centers of influence, securing these complementary relationships for our financial advisory practice, and then eventually was overseeing the advisor team. So we had more than 30 financial advisors. Okay. For a company that had then more than $2 billion in funds under management. Okay. That was the last role I had before I moved to America.
So what actually happened so that you decided to go, screw this, I'm going to go to the US and get MBA and move on?
Yeah, well, a lot of Australians want to go to the UK, and I don't know why. Like, I just, it's the weather sucks. I don't know. Yeah, you've got a lot of places that you can travel to.
The weather's not that great either.
That's true.
Right?
Yes, exactly. Winter in Boston was brutal. But I wanted to go to America. I've always loved the American culture. I think it's so cool. So I realized in my corporate career, for me, the biggest challenge at that point was time. I wasn't necessarily learning more. It was just time. How do I fit it all in a day? And anyone who's worked in the corporate world, or even especially as an entrepreneur, the magic rule is that there is always more work. So if you're killing yourself to try and get to the end of some deadline without realizing that there's another deadline just around the corner, well, that's on you. And it's not a great way to live. There is always more work. So for me, when the only challenge was time, I realized that I needed to get out of there. And I've always had, they've been women, I'm not sure why, but I've always had women bosses who, when I've made that decision, they have said to me to really affirm that decision, to say, you know what, it is time for you to go and spread your wings. You are destined for something so much bigger than what you've been doing. Just, we're excited to see it and let us know what we can do to support. Okay. And that's been just such an empowering, motivating thing for me. So I made the decision then where I went backpacking around South and Central America for 4 months, which was a great way of being exposed to a whole bunch of different cultures.
Was that the first time you went out of the country?
No. I've been doing a lot of travel. Australians travel. I don't know. Yeah, we just go. We'll explore the world before we'll explore our own country. So yeah, I went and did that, and then I landed in Boston, which was crazy because that was the year of the Boston Marathon bombing, and my girlfriend at the time was running in that race. That was just a crazy. It was a crazy year in so many different ways, but it also exposed me to entrepreneurship for the first time, and that was where I basically made a commitment to myself to never work for anyone else ever again. I just felt more comfortable just on my own path.
So how long were you there?
That was 2012 to 2013.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you came to LA after that?
I left that MBA. So I had the piece of paper, the MBA, the 3 letters that apparently guaranteed that I'd go and have any job that I wanted from there. And it turns out that it wasn't the case, because I spent 3 months in Shanghai, where it's hard to concentrate on getting a job in America if you're in an entirely different culture and country trying to figure all of those things out. And my girlfriend and I, we'd been together for, I think it was about 3 years, and we had broken up a couple of months before we just drifted apart. So we'd broken up a couple of months before the program finished. So I found myself single with this piece of paper, leaving Boston without any idea, without any direction of what I wanted to do. And I was traveling in LA just for a little bit, and I was like, wow, this is a cool part of the world. And I had stopped in LA on my way to Hawaii to go and attend a wedding where I was the best man. And you probably know where this is heading, but there was a bridesmaid there in this wedding, and she had just broken up from a long-term relationship.
Really?
And we had, we really hit it off, and we started dating from that moment. And she had just moved from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles. And I thought, you know what, let's just, I'm never one to really overthink a situation, so let's get it done. So I moved to LA, and let's see what happens. So I moved to LA, where I knew her and one other person, and that was it. So it was really, for me, starting again in an entirely new city where I barely knew anyone, to try and figure out what I would do. And it took me I sent my resume probably more than 100 companies and got nothing.
In LA?
In LA, wow. Which was crazy. I couldn't believe it that I was getting absolutely nothing. And it was such a great lesson about the importance of relationships. And for visa purposes, I needed to be going back to Australia every 3 months. It was very, if I was an employer, I probably.
You had a student visa?
It was a
practical training, right?
I forget what it was. Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, you have like a year after.
Let me pull you back just a little bit. Just a little bit. Okay? Yeah. So you and me both came over here for college, right? I was international student. And you're an international student from Australia. I wanted to know 2 things. One, how was your experience as an international student? Culture shock, if you had any. And although I had Australian girlfriend when I was in Hong Kong, how was it different to have an American girlfriend? Yeah. Because you never dated an American girl before, right?
Yeah. Well,
so when you came over here and had that experience, how did you feel? What's the difference that you can share with us?
Well, her family is a New England Patriots NFL family, so that was an easy alignment, because moving to Boston, of course, it's a New England Patriots town. The culture shock in Boston.
It's totally different from Australia.
It is. What's funny is that no one could understand a word that I said, which was crazy. So they would say,
"Fan income, eh?"
Yeah, exactly. That'd be like, "My name's Sonny," and I'd be like, "My name's James," and they'd say, "Jimes." And I'm like, "James, what are you freaking talking about? How do you not understand my name?" So that got a little bit annoying. But I loved Boston. But from a cultural perspective, it was the first time that I was exposed to entrepreneurs, like truly exposed to these people that had their own businesses. And my job, I became president of the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Club at the university that I was at. So my job was to organize these events where we would get in these high-profile local business leaders to come in and would speak to our group. We'd organize these high-profile events where we had some great people speaking. So I got to rub shoulders with some interesting people, and it made me realize that when you talk to an entrepreneur, as opposed to someone who has a job, which is totally fine. I'm not, do whatever you want to do, whatever you feel is right for you. Right. When you talk to people who have their own business, there is a different level of energy. There is a different just level that when you talk to these people of just how much just this happiness, this animation of how they describe their life. And I was just instantly attracted to that. And it made me realize that I needed to go and have my own business as well. So that to me was the biggest cultural thing about Boston was I miss the weather of Australia, but I love being exposed to entrepreneurs. And that led to just me going down the path of launching products and companies in just about every industry that you can think of. That gave me, I love my MBA, but it gave me 1,000 times more real world experience than any degree ever could.
And for those American girls who wants to date an Australian man, what was your experience like and what they should think about?
Yeah, well, you know what? In the first week, I moved in. My roommate was an Aussie guy, and my wife, who's Mexican on her dad's side, she sent us to the grocery store to go and buy a bunch of ingredients. So she would make this. This is in LA.
Okay.
She would make this Mexican dish for us for dinner on the condition that we would go and get these ingredients. My God, it took us about 2 hours at the grocery store to go and get. We're like, queso fresco? What is this? And it's so embarrassing looking back on this. We had absolutely no idea. But cultural difference with my wife, it was a very easy. It was a very easy integration because she was best friends with the person that I had known. With her best friend had lived in Australia for about 10 years. With, you know, one of my very good friends. So I knew her really, really well. So she knew all the skeletons in my closet.
She adjusted to you.
Exactly. Well, she knew everything I knew very little about her, but she knew everything about me. So it was great because I didn't have to worry about any secrets being revealed and not that there's much in my past, but she knew more than I did about it all. So no, it was very, very easy. And it was the first time I'd ever been in a relationship where the other person had been a really good, willing and able cook. Like they loved making food.
Oh, yeah?
And there's a lot of talk about sort of gender roles and all of that. I think when it comes to, there shouldn't be any reference about gender roles. I think if you're in a relationship or just a human, you should learn to cook because it's just such a great way of being able to fuel your body.
Of course.
So the moment I had a girl who could cook, I was like, wow, this is incredible.
You're going to marry her.
Exactly. I'm going to marry this woman. Yes.
Grab yourself some ice so I can pour you some more drink.
I'm enjoying this Japanese whiskey, as you can tell.
This true serum.
The truth serum. I'm nervous for what's next in the podcast. But,
No. So, I mean, I'm really enjoying learning about your life. And, I mean, it's kind of, I know you're life coach, advisor, speaker, and I'm kind of learning why you got here, how you got here, and why you're doing this, you know? And I think the people in Japan or whoever is listening to this, they could really understand where you're coming from. And that's more powerful than anything else, I think.
Yeah, it is. I mean,
all the troubles and challenges and tribulation that you had, that makes your word more valuable.
Yeah.
Isn't that true, you think?
It is,
absolutely.
absolutely.
As a coach, tell me.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Okay. Absolutely. And so a really big focus for me, which I think is really undervalued, is you need to, as an individual, whoever it is, improve your skills as much as you can. Just make it a focus. Just every single day, what can you do to get better? Reading books, listening to podcasts.
Wait a minute. We'll get there with your win today. But before we get there, I want to know more about you and how you got to decide to become who you are now. Yeah. Right. So after you got to LA, you sent out 100 resumes and application. You got nowhere. Yeah. Right. So what happened then? I mean, you were obviously discouraged.
Yeah.
Right?
Very discouraged, right. and very rudderless, I would say. And then I was able to get some work for visa purposes that allowed me to actually stay in the country, which was good for my relationship. And I realized after a couple of months of that, I was like, why am I working and spending all of my time to make someone else's dreams come true? That was it. That was a turning point for me. That was a light bulb moment. Why am I working, spending so much time to make someone else's dreams come true? Okay. And at that point, I launched a social media brand with a friend of mine. We had an activewear company that we would eventually launch after that. We launched one of the world's...
You mean clothing?
Yeah, clothing. Yeah. We sponsored athletes in the CrossFit Games, the Commonwealth Games, Olympic Games. Right. We launched one of the world's largest CrossFit gyms, this massive, I think it's 14,000 square foot facility where we had professional sports teams come and train. So I had all of these things going on. So that was what I then ended up going all in on. Wow. And then I had an opportunity to meet some people who were making a movie about Think and Grow Rich. And, that was the book that changed my father's life. Right. And so we had the chance to go and meet up with them, and they just said, we love your energy. Tell us how you can be involved in the project. And I said, well, you're obviously writing a book about it, to go hand in hand and to accompany the movie. And they were just very, very vague on the details. And I said, here's what you should do. there's 13 principles in Think and Grow Rich. You should introduce those principles briefly in a modern context, and then through the power of story, show examples of 2 people in each chapter who personify those principles in a modern context, because people remember stories. People find stories more engaging. And there was an awkward pause for about 10 seconds, and they said, "Can you do it?" I said, "Yeah, I'll knock it out of the park for you."
Oh, really?
And that was where I came on board as officially from the Napoleon Hill Foundation, being tasked to write a modern companion of the best-selling self-help book of all time. And that was a crazy thing, but that was really, and executive producer of the film. And it was the first moment in my life where it felt like the clouds had parted, and it made me realize that this is who you are and this is what you want to do. I'd been involved in all of these different businesses, and as hard as I worked, I just didn't really care deep down. Like, if I was honest with myself retrospectively, I didn't really care about them. And I've since been involved in other businesses where that's been clear. Like, you need to really care and be a big believer in the problem and the solution, because it enables you to work a lot harder, and you just do better because you're more passionate about it. And the people that we had involved in the film and the book, like, I would sit down and interview Bob Proctor from the movie The Secret, Rob Dyrdek, who, recently his show Ridiculousness stopped after, however many hundreds of episodes, Barbara Corcoran from Shark Tank. Like, I was sitting down with these people to learn about their stories. And as a result of having those interviews, a few questions became abundantly clear to me. I wanted to meet more of these people more often, because that just made me just so inspired, so energized, so motivated. I needed to meet these people more often. I needed to be in that orbit. So that was rule number one. Question number one, how can I get around these people more often? Question number two was, how can I become friends with these people? I didn't want it to be a fleeting interaction. I want it to be something where, if once I meet you, I want you to be in my phone. So if there's anything I ever need or that you need from me, we are one phone call, one audio message, one message away. So that was question number two, was how can I become friends with these people? And question number three was, how can I build my own brand in the process? When you're working with something like Think and Grow Rich, which was published in 1937, there are many stakeholders. There were a lot of just different opinions and responsibilities in that project. If I had something of my own that I was 100% responsible for, everything was very easy. And that's where Win the Day came from. It was a podcast that gave me a platform where I could invite billion-dollar entrepreneurs, SEAL Team 6 operators, medical experts, some of the most extraordinary people on the planet into my world to sit down and have a conversation like this about all of the amazing things that they have done. It enabled me to become friends with them, because when you meet people in person, you have vulnerable conversations like this. You can't help but be bonded to that person. And through Win the Day, I was able to build my own brand in the process that now has more than 100 million views online, and has led to an incredible amount of relationships that I'm still pinching myself for.
So it's amazing that how, when you said this, the rule number one is you wanted to be connected to these people. You wanted to be able to call them. You wanted to be friend with them. You wanted to have a relationship with them, and because you're interested. And I think that's very true with my podcast. I'm not doing this for my health, for money. I'm just interested in you. I want all these questions.
And that really comes across too. That's why you're so good at this. Yeah, because you actually care and you're interested.
I really am very curious about how you got here, because I've known, life coach and people like that, which is, by the way, not very popular or familiar in the Japanese society. But I wonder why you're doing this. I don't want you to be offended, but who gave you the license to do this? Right? Because there's no certificate, there's a license. You're going through life just like I am, right? So that's why I ask all these questions about how you got here. And with that in mind, I wanted to find out more about what Win the Day is all about. Okay. How do you measure winning the day? What is there like, 3 steps, 5 steps that you have to follow to do that? I'm
It's
sure
even
I
even
know
more
you have
simple
the
than that.
answer to these.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And also, like this book in Japanese.
It's Napoleon Hill on the cover, not me. So,
Exactly, this is Napoleon Hill, and now I know why you connected to Napoleon Hill, right? So we just mentioned about the Napoleon Hill publication, and this is people can buy for 1,680 yen plus.
How much is that in US dollars?
It's about $10.
Oh, good. There we go. An easy investment.
Yeah.